All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another afternoon panel. This one is, I believe, titled All About Editing.
Yep.
All right. So first of all, let's start off with basic introductions. For those of you who have not seen me at other panels here before, I am Fugue. I have worked with both Sofawolf and with Fur Planet in a variety of capacities, as writer, as editor, as slusher, all the kind of basic roles behind the scenes. That's kind of what I've been doing.
I'm TJ Mind. I have been published in a number of Fangs and Heat 15. I'm also the lead editor of Altered States Draconic Desires, now available downstairs in the dealer's den at Fur Planet booth.
So this is all about editing. So this means basically the stages in between once you have completed a first draft and once you have sent it off in whatever form it is going to be actually published in, either whether or not that's just the upload button on Fur Affinity or whether or not you are actually submitting it to a publication for being published.
To also further explain, this is you editing. This is not editing for others. That will be in 2 panels from now, which we'll go into those details then.
So I suppose like the first and most basic advice about editing your own work is wait. This is one of the most common pieces of advice you'll ever hear, and I will repeat it because it's a good piece of advice, which is spend, once you get done with that first draft, spend a couple weeks, sometimes maybe a couple months, put it down, walk away, don't think about it. Don't try and come back to it and work on it immediately all over again. And the reason for this is because when you're in the heat of the moment of writing it, you are thinking about lots of different things, but you aren't necessarily thinking about how the words look on the page. And so once you are, you've given it some time, you can come back to it, you kind of have a fresh view of what everything is actually looking like, and that allows you to have a better view of what's actually going on there. It allows you to catch things that you would not have caught before.
Something I want to emphasize that was stated earlier is specifically not just wait, you have to finish your work first. One of the things that people, that especially new writers, can get caught up in is editing while they're writing. They start writing a draft and they make changes before hitting the end and make changes and make changes. There are some people I've heard of who get caught up in that cycle of self-editing that they never get to a finished draft. It's really hard to actually edit something if you don't have an end yet.
I will say, however, that one of the things I've been known to do on several occasions is I'll start writing a story and then I'll realize about 2 or 3 pages in, it's like, I'm not feeling this. This is not working for whatever reason. But what I try not to do is to sit back and revise what I've already written. I often just try and say, let me start from scratch with a new take on it. Let me do that so I'm not going to get caught up in that. But I could have done this slightly better, because that's a big trap. Even professional writers who write all the time can sometimes get caught into that of but it could just be just that tiny bit better. I could make it even better. So yes, part of the whole editing process is sometimes just realizing, sometimes you need to stop that process too. When is it good enough? When it's good enough.
One of the so I'm also expanding on something he said earlier because I keep going back to things you just said that I want to go back further. Specifically on the letting a project wait, because especially if you just finished writing something, you know what's going on with this story so much. You know your characters, you know what your characters are thinking, and you think it's all on the page. Trust me, it's not. And sometimes that's important. You don't want everything on the page, but you want to make sure enough is there. If you're too close to the story, you're going to know in your mind that's already there. One of the reasons to wait is it gives you that opportunity to step back and look at it again with fresh eyes and see, hey, I'm not right in these characters' minds. I'm not knowing forwards and backwards what they're thinking this second. It gives you time to almost kind of sort of relearn what's going on in your own work and find potential opportunities to do a scene, to make a scene stronger.
And another piece of extremely common advice, and one that I use all the time, is the idea that when you're going to actually sit down and edit, a big thing you should do is read your work aloud. This serves multiple purposes, the big one of which is that if you are reading your work aloud and you ever stumble, you of all people are the most likely to know what the intonation that you are intending, where the pauses are supposed to be in your own work. And if you are struggling with actually getting it out and saying it, then every reader is going to be struggling with it just that much more. So any point where you kind of get tripped up yourself is a good place you should go in, tweak things, revise things so that it'll work smoother.
I'll admit, I'm also bad at reading stuff aloud myself. When I'm reading something, I'm always reading it quietly in my head. I'll cheat, I'll throw it in a text-to-speech. I literally just Google text-to-speech and will find whatever random thing Google gives me and take my document, throw it in scene by scene, and just let it read. Because you'll realize when you, so-and-so thought something, but they know they threw something. Sometimes you'll add a character or miss a character in your keyboard and your fingers just kept going and words like, yep, that's a real word, congratulations, keep going. But text-to-speech is a robot, it will read what is on the page. Tone's gonna suck, but something is better than nothing, trust me.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk about like the processes of how to go about editing kind of from start to finish.
Ooh, sure.
So, I mean, again, the idea of your editing for yourself and not having other people edit yours, usually you're starting at some point after you finish the first draft and you're ending before you kind of send it off. There's usually multiple different kind of layers or styles of which you might do self-editing in the same way that even a publisher or a critique group might look at your work and consider it from multiple perspectives. One of which is the high-level perspective of, does the plot work? Do the events actually unfold as we want them to unfold? And then you can get more granular. You can start looking at, okay, here's a paragraph that's just description. Does this description actually describe what I want it to describe? And then there's the even more fine granular stuff of like, this is a sentence. Did this sentence do what I wanted the sentence to do? Did it make people feel excited at a moment when there was a bunch of exciting action happening? And usually you want to try and do things in roughly that order, because the last thing you want to do is have spent, I don't know, an entire day revising 3 or 4 pages of getting all those sentences to sound absolutely perfect, and then realize when you're done with it that, oh, that scene wasn't necessary, you need to cut all of it.
I remember specifically working on a story so much and reading through it so many times that I knew these words so well forwards and backwards and didn't have the time to set it down between edits for those weeks or months at a time, because deadlines are fun, that I was literally, like, I think by the 7th time, I'm like, I know these words too well. I made a change to this one line and I need to make sure that the cadence still works. Hey, text-to-speech, spit it back out. But again, that's later in the process because I'm too close to these words. And of course, I also think that the final step of all of this is is you attempt at copy editing. And again, say attempt because you're going to miss words. Everyone will miss words. You go down in any book in the dealer's den, you will find typos. If you are that kind of person, you can look for typos.
I have done copy editing on a couple of books, and I can not look at those books because I've realized in every single one of them I have missed something, and it pains me deep in my soul. And yeah, this is not just a thing that's true of like, hey, the fandom is not professional writers and professional editors. No, this is also true of professionally done books and professional copy editors and all that stuff. Everyone will miss something. Don't feel bad if you have missed something. Now, having said that, please try to get your title page correct. Please don't misspell the title. And although this is for a later panel, if you're going to write a cover letter to send something to a publisher, make certain you get the name of the publisher correct. We had a fun one where a story was submitted to Sofa Wolf, but they started off their cover letter with Dear Fur Planet. Thankfully, we were good friends with them, and we just basically laughed at this and then said, yeah, it's a good story, we're publishing it anyways.
So before we ramble further on about our editing processes, are there any questions from the audience here? Cool. I'll keep rambling. So I'm trying to think of, unfortunately, all my recent examples of stories I've written. Oh, no, go ahead.
How do you feel about rewrites? Just like draft on one side, just whole hog rewrite on the other.
It sounds like you're talking about my novel right now. I started, no, and that happens. I remember My work in progress, my current novel work in progress has been a work in progress for at least 5-ish years at this point, which is nothing compared to some other writers I know. So hooray! And when I wrote my first draft and was like 1,000 words from the end, I was at about 47,000 words total. I'm realizing as I'm this close to hitting the end that I treat one of my female characters really, really bad, and all she becomes is angst for another character. I'm like, I am not doing this character justice, and I'm writing this like a dumb man. I need to not be a dumb man and give her more. Ended up, I actually took a week-long writing retreat to re-outline my entire novel, redo it, and I technically, first thing I did, I spent half the week reading through my story again, finding out what I currently did, realizing where my gaps in the story are, the things I need to move around, the things I need to completely cut out and gut to rechange, because I can't have my character become an object like this, because that is so messed up, and I have friends who will kill me for this. Kiri would have killed me so goddamn hard.
Yes, she would have.
And no, can't do that. Cannot do that. And so you turn around and you realize that you need to do this, and that's what I was doing. As I literally had my draft open, I had my bad synopsis that I quickly slapped together, and then did side by sides. And I said, okay, here's what we did. And I re-outlined my entire story, and which is still part of the editing process for me. Especially if you are a pantser, a person who just writes by the seat of their pants, or even if you have an outline and your outline goes off the rails and you are now writing something completely different, that's fine. You can stop and re-outline your story with where it's going now, because your character's decided, I don't like where that road's going, let's see what this road does instead. And sometimes you have a better story or a more interesting story with that. Rewrites happen, but be it a scene or half a damn novel, it'll happen.
What I will say is that, especially part of your editing process is your editing process. And if it's the thing that works for you, then by all means do it. There is no one correct editing process that works for everyone, and anyone who tells you that should be slapped upside the head. But also, just kind of like for everyone, maybe they might want to try this method. Generally what I have found is that if I am able to clearly identify what in, say, a sentence or a paragraph is not working, then I will just go in and edit in the process of that one. But if I'm looking at a paragraph and I'm like, this doesn't feel quite right, but I don't know why, I'll often like kick it down a little bit the page, and I'll just say, let me try and rewrite this paragraph from scratch, having just read it. And then sometimes I'll find, oh, hey, in the flow of writing things, that helps me figure out how to get around whatever issue it was I was able to feel but not identify. So I think that is a very good process for that.
Part of the reason why I like that is, for me personally, it's way faster. Like if I have a draft that is pretty messy, it's just way faster to just like look at it on one side and then just completely rewrite it on the other side.
Yeah.
But
And again, the your part of your editing process is very key for that.
Janet.
So I suppose we could also think about, like, from the kind of different types of editing, maybe what processes work well in each of those. So, like, especially if you're down to the last segment of like doing the final copy editing stuff, how do you actually do your own copy editing? Now, ideally, you should have someone else that you're going to throw your work up against who can at least look superficially at some of this. But unless you are getting a professional copy editor in to look carefully at every single line, at some point you're probably going to be your own copy editor and have to go through it line by line and check for all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, part of this is just the, whatever word processor you are using, whether that be Word or Scrivener or what have you, if it has a spell check feature, use it. Even if sometimes you will hate that spell check feature. I hate all spell checkers because none of them recognize my last name is actually me.
I mean, I can also cite the most recent one that I shared with the group of Word, saying you only need one punctuation here with a period and a close quotation mark.
Oh gosh. But that was Word's new AI feature.
Yeah, no.
No, it
Dying
didn't
of
work
fire.
well.
Oh my God.
Didn't work well. So yeah, looking at that is often a very good way to like get started on these kinds of things. I, as a slusher, have definitely seen things where people have submitted this story and they did not do the basic spell check on it because there are words that are just flat out spelled wrong. And this looks very bad from a I want to ultimately publish this story kind of perspective. But then there's also just like, how do you start to learn, you know, what goes into good punctuation, what goes into good spelling, what goes into good sentence structure, even beyond that. Some of that is just practice. Some of that is read more. The more you read, the more you will see other people doing these sorts of things.
Some of that is pray, because I don't spell gooder.
And also, if you're really interested in this kind of aspect of writing, you know, pick up the Chicago Style Guide. You don't necessarily have to use everything that the Chicago Style Guide does, but having a style guide handy can be the sort of thing of going, wait, so how am I actually supposed to punctuate AM and PM? What's the difference between an M dash and an N dash? By the way, if you know what the difference between M dash and an N dash and a hyphen is, I love you. You're my friend. And yeah, just all these kinds of things that maybe you've heard of at some point, but you don't necessarily know what to do with. Grab a book on it. There are some books out there which are very much written from the more kind of pop perspective. Eat, Shoots, and Leaves is the classic one. I just recently saw one called There's a Tittle in This Title. Tittle is the little dot over the I.
Elements of style.
No.
You don't like them?
Sorry, that was a knee-jerk response. Sparf is rubbed off on me.
Yeah.
I also sass Sparf with that all the time, but that's neither here nor there. Strunk and White's Elements of Style is a book that has advice. I have also heard, and that is fact. I've also heard, because I am bad, I have not read a lot of my editing stuff is all self-taught, and I just cross my fingers and pray and really use other people. I'm trying not to talk about any of that aspects of it now. I've heard that there's advice in Strunk and White that in Elements of Style that actually isn't. That they'll give you one bit of advice and then later on not follow their own advice, which is why usually, yes, it is what is always cited. There's a reason why we've been talking about Eat, Shoots, and Leaves instead, because it's better. So again, from what I have heard.
Yeah, my general thought on Strunk and White, Elements of Style, is that it's a great book to get started with, but it's not something you should rely on long term. Like if you're just getting started on trying to think about things about style, about punctuation, all that sort of stuff, you could certainly do worse. But once you've kind of really gotten into it, then you'll start looking at Elements of Style and just go, oh, you are like little baby. So, yeah, I'm not quite as opposed to it as Sparf is, but at the same time, I'm like, there's better options out there. And yes, even though I had said things like go out and buy an actual style guide by Chicago Manual Style or something like that, very often you can just Google this stuff. Ignore the AI overview at the top, because again, that's going to be wrong. But there's various different websites. I think Chicago Manual Style has a website where they give lots of information on this kind of stuff. Grammar Girl generally has some good information. I have gone into the depths. There are forums on the internet devoted entirely to linguistics, and you will find people arguing about some of the craziest minutiae that you have never thought about. Also, one of the funniest facts that you learn if you start going deep into linguistics, English has an order to its adjectives that we never actually really discuss.
We know it here, not here.
Yeah. This bugs so many people who learn English as a second language because, what is it? I'm trying to think of a good example.
Big red ball.
Yeah, the big red ball, not red big ball. Sounds wrong if you speak English natively, right? But like, unless you really get into linguistics, you'd never think of that as actually being a thing. You would just naturally do it.
I'm going to do a quick bad. I remember I was editing a story in Altered States, and I was going over it, and for some reason, a number of sentence structures just didn't seem right to me. I couldn't explain it academically, but I ended up giving a number, like dozens of words per comment, which normally my comments are 4 or 5 words at most. They were getting dozens because I had to explain why, because I understand what a subject is. I kind of think I remember what a predicate is. But you're talking about this, and by saying you're talking about this, I'm now thinking about this when you say that, which then doesn't vibe because of reasons X, Y, and Z. This doesn't flow right because of the way this order is, and I'm giving so many damn words. Know it here, don't know it here.
Yeah, and that's just for like the final copy editing, proofreading stage of going through editing. And long before you do that, you want to be thinking about the macro level of your story and like characters and scenes and all these sorts of things. So do you have any particular advice for going at that level?
So for me, a lot of that actually comes in, that aspect of developmental editing really happens for me during my outline, because the way as I mentioned earlier, I am a planner, not a pantser. I don't write by the seat of my pants. I think of my story, and I usually, in order for me to write now, like I started off pantsing a lot of my works. I can't do that now. I end up staring at a blank page and words don't happen. For me, it's a matter of I need to know high level what's going on with my story and then make sure my things will flow. I will turn around, and as I have my story, I'm outlining my story and I'll hit a roadblock. I don't know how this thing works. I will turn around to some other writer friends of mine and like, I'm going to voice chat a thing with you real quick, and I rubber duck this. I'm like, I'm going to ask you a question because I think I have this difficulty with thing X, Y, with scene B here because reasons A, B, and C. I want to get to point D for whatever reason, but I'm worried about this current roadblock. I kind of want to do this thing here, but if I do that thing, I have to, wait, no, then if I do that thing, then this character could do this thing, and then it does this and this and this and this, and we get to point D. Awesome, I figured out my problem, send.
I have literally gotten messages from him. I'll come back after like working for the day, and I'll see message 1 says, hey, I need to talk about this problem. I'll have about 5 minutes of recorded messages followed by, got it, don't need you anymore.
Or at best, does that make sense still?
Yeah.
And the answer is usually, write it, go do the thing, come back later.
The macro level of editing is usually a very hard thing to do on your own. It's usually the thing where you get a lot of great feedback from sharing this with other people, which is again why we're kind of saving that more for later talks. There are some things that you can do, and usually it's if you go, I think, from the outlining stage to the I want to write a synopsis stage. This is more common for people who are writing a full book and submitting a full book that you will want typically when you're submitting this to a publisher to include a synopsis, which is anywhere from 1 to 5 page, depending on the publisher, short version of the book. And that's usually the, spare no expense, spoil the ending, all that kind of good stuff. Tell us what the story of this is in as much detail as we have given you space to do so. And it can be a useful exercise once you're done writing whatever it is you have to go back and say, okay, well, let me try and write a synopsis. Let me see what is actually integral to my own story. And then if you go, well, I spent all this time in the synopsis talking about how this character was so important and I never mentioned this other character. And then you might think, well, wait a minute, I don't actually use that other character in any meaningful way in the story. Do they need to still be there? And the answer might be no. How'd they go? That's one way you can do it. Trying to write down your outline again from whatever outline, if you had an outline beforehand, might be good. Go through each chapter and say, here's the major scenes, what happened in this, and then, if you've not seen Malcolm Cross, aka Foosball, he's got a couple of novels out there, Dog Country, Mouse Cage, and I want to say he's working on one more. Dangerous Jade is also him, I think.
I only remember their X story.
Yeah. He will occasionally post pictures, formerly on X and nowadays on Blue Sky, of his gigantic corkboard, where he will plot out the entire story in like little index cards, pin them all in so you can see the actual flow of the story moving through. And that's one way in which he goes through and makes certain that he's got all the scenes he needs to and he doesn't have anything that he doesn't need. So if you're working especially on a longer work and you're needing to consider, are there things I need to remove, are there things I need to add, taking those gigantic 10,000 word scenes and crushing them down into a 1 or 2 sentence description of just what the heck happened here and why is it important, and then arranging those can help you see those kind of patterns better.
Now I will say this is going to be, this advice I'm about to give is more so for longer works. It matters for it matters more for short works, but I think of it more in longer works editing. When you are writing a story, your words should be doing at least 2 of 3 things: advancing the plot, developing the characters, developing the setting. If you are not doing 2 of those 3 things, you need to make some changes. With that re-outline, it's an opportunity for you to go through what is this scene doing to advance the plot? What is the scene doing to develop the characters? What is the scene doing to establish my setting? Crap, I have more work to do on my novel. Sorry, I'm also in the middle of editing this fucking thing and I don't want to do it. Editing a novel is scary. Short stories are so much goddamn easier.
But your friends want to see your book, so you will finish writing your book.
The book
won't
is.
you?
I am. I know. Sorry, I'm. You aren't alone. Editing is fucking scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of writers who will be like, oh man, I love writing so much, I hate editing. And it's just a very common thing because when you're writing, especially if you hit a good groove, it can just feel like the words are flowing so wonderfully. And then you hit the point where you have to go, but maybe some of those words were bad words and I need to turn them into good words. And that's hard. So just know you are not alone. Actually, that's a really good thing to talk about here, even more so than anything else, is even though you are editing on your own some of the time, definitely feel free to just like chat with your friends about this sort of stuff. As if you know the writers, go out there and commiserate about the editing work you are having to do right now, because I guarantee you there are other editors feeling the exact same pain and agony that you are.
Other writers, not editors.
Yes. Whatever.
We aren't talking about editors yet. That's again 2 panels from now.
I haven't had enough caffeine today.
Should have said something. We would get you some liquid sugar.
Yeah, but I thought about it like 10 minutes before the panel.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're editing and you get to that part where you're like, emotionally, this is so bad. Where you're like, I hate everything I have ever done, but it's actually not that bad.
You cry, you give it a moment, you come back to it in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 years, whatever it is, and you eventually power through it.
Yeah. Again, time helps build in that distance to your own work. Because part of the problem that a lot of people have when they are editing and not just writing is that they love what they have done. They put hard work into this, and now we got to change that. But I love those words. I put so much effort into those words. So if you like give yourself that time, you can have that moment of going, okay, yeah, I put some effort into those words, but I can make better words now.
So I will admit, with my, I'm something that I do think does count. So for example, citing my novel again, I got to the end over 2 years ago at this point. I got my first draft completely done in a manner that I am more happy with it. I still know my baby is ugly. I don't know how to change my baby to make it not ugly. However, knowing your baby is ugly and identifying that fact is still important and still part of the editing process. I will admit, for my own works, I am not, especially again, novel, scary, I don't know how to do this. But if I can go through here and say, I know this doesn't work, something is off, and I know it's specifically about my main character is what I'm most worried about right now, I'm also nervous about my secondary character that I haven't been able to get to yet because, again, that's in 30,000 word chapter 2. And that's only starting to get into their journey. But if being able to go through your own work and see, okay, being able to identify what your opportunities are, because again, I'm not going to say that you're doing anything wrong. I'm not saying you're doing anything bad. You can say your baby's ugly. We can make your baby pretty. That's fine. But it's not wrong. It's just, it can be improved. And improvement is always good. It's being able to read through your work, find out where your flaws are, and being able to take that to another person and say, hey, can you help me with this specifically? How you help with that's going to be a later panel thing, but.
This is advice I generally give when people are working with other editors, but with self-editing, it's also true, is that you must simultaneously be your own greatest advocate and your own worst critic. So you need to be happy, you need to be proud of the words you have put on the page in order to be able to argue with yourself that, no, that part did work and I want to keep that. But you also have to be your own worst critic and say, well, that part didn't work. I shouldn't keep it just because I put the effort into it. I should work more to make it even better. So being able to do both of those things and being able to be in both of those states of mind about your own work is an important skill to have.
another way to rephrase that, we'll get to you in just a hot second. The turn of phrase, kill your darlings. That doesn't necessarily mean characters. It doesn't mean you need to find your character that you love the most and put the knife in their back. It could be a scene. It could be a turn of phrase. It could be something that is, I really like this scene and it does nothing for the story. If you understand, yes, you really like that scene, that's great. If it's doing nothing for the story, though, you might have to take it out and move it to your cut file to save for later and put somewhere else.
Yes, very important. If something isn't working, don't delete. Do not delete. Have a separate document, cut, paste. Because especially sometimes you might find that those words didn't work here. They might work better somewhere else, and you'll be happy to still have them.
I have, like when I'm, again, I've been going through my first chapter, I'm cheating, I have the feedback from person, I'm applying said edits, I've cut things out, moved to the cut document because this character doesn't need these words, but I want that information still. That information and what's being delivered in this order is going to be coming from another character's mouth with slightly different tone and delivery and maybe more swear words because they swear. But I'll move that later into the chapter, and having that filed, not deleting those words, made sure that I was able to, again, have the side-by-side and be able to say, oh, here's the words I'm basically keeping, let's go ahead and make it with this character's voice. Saw your hand.
No, you're okay. So like we've talked a lot about like, all right, we're gonna cut, like, or like try and rework something. Where, and I know it's gonna vary for everyone, but where do you kind of draw that line of, I've reworked this so much, it's just not gonna work here, even though you might think it's really important to the story you're trying to tell?
If you're disgusted with the words, that's probably at least the point to stop. Especially if you had the time to take a break, and if you come back to it and you're still disgusted with these, no, let me rephrase that. When I say disgusted, I think I cannot look at these words in this order anymore. I am tired of seeing these words. I know these too well. I'm reading 3 words ahead before my eyes are there. I know these words too well. That's a point where you just have to stop editing. And if that, maybe get someone else's eyes on it at that point, reach out to an associate, a cohort, someone, I know, it's been a weekend.
Yeah, I'll very much repeat that idea. If you have hit the point where you are disgusted with your own stuff, that's the point where you absolutely need to get someone else in there to help you out. Have a trusted friend who you trust to not only tell you when you're right, but when you're wrong. Another writer that you respect. Get an outside opinion if you can't handle your own stuff anymore. Mm-hmm. Although that does bring up the excellent point of when should you stop editing? So, as a person who's worked on the publishing side of things, I have seen so many writers who have fallen into various traps. One of the traps I've seen, of course, is the writer who keeps talking about how they're going to start writing this as soon as they know how to write perfectly. And 30 years later, they haven't put a single word to page. The other trap I sometimes see is the writer who writes something and they don't stop editing it. And they will spend years, decades in at least one case, constantly editing it and trying to make it better and better and better and better. And I think personally, the place to stop is when you have hit a point where the amount of noticeable improvement in the text from one editing pass to the next is not really much anymore. When, okay, yes, I have found 2 typos and I've slightly reworded that sentence in a 8,000 word chapter. That is no longer worth the time investment to keep trying to polish it. So that's the point where I would say that's a good cutoff point for stopping and saying, okay, this needs to move on towards actual publication.
What I might also suggest is try to find some way to add in a deadline, and not, it may be a self-imposed deadline, but maybe there's a way you can reach out to your friends and ask them to help you enforce that. Be it, I need to share this chapter with friends by date X. We are going to get together and we're going to have our own little write meet on this certain day, and I need to have I already told them I will have this chapter, I need to give them something by that day. For some people, deadlines really help put the screws to your thumbs. Other people, they make a fun whooshing sound as they go flying by.
Do we have any other questions? We've kind of been talking up here a while. Question there in the back. There's a couple of different techniques that you could try there. One that I've seen a lot is I don't know what the exact name for it is, the sprinting method.
That's, yeah.
One where you typically do, okay, I'm going to write for 25 minutes and then stop for 5. Don't write a single darn word for those 5 minutes, and then start over again. Sprint for 25, stop for 5. Sprint for 25, stop for 5. And do that until you feel like, okay, I'm tired, I need to move on and go do something else. And that's a thing that I've seen a lot of people do because it allows your mind to kind of catch up and reorganize itself in those 5 minutes. And during those 25 minutes, you're just going right, just get the words on the page. So it kind of balances out the two things of get some writing done and also take a gentle break from the writing.
Something I've also done is normally especially if I'm if I have a deadline, like the thing that really does help me is, especially when it comes to short stories, is when anthologies were a thing back in the before times. It was the idea of I have a theme, I have a story, I want to write this story. My goal is to try to write 200 words a day. And at that point, I get my 200 words, I get to the end of this paragraph, and I'm going to walk away. Because normally I want to play video games anyways. I want to go play Magic. I'm itching to play this Esper Tempo deck I have, and I want to go do that, but I need to first get my 200 words, or else I'm going to spend the rest of the night playing Magic and not get my words in. So I'm going to sit down, grumble about it, get my 200 words in. Sometimes 200 becomes 400 because I'm in the zone, I'm here, I'm in this scene, and the words are flowing. Other times it's a fight. I end up getting that 200 words, and I'm like, fuck you, I'm done, going away, grumble, give me, I want my Magic. Freaking blue player's not letting me play my counter spells.
I forget who it was, but there's at least one famous author out there who's, I think in their case, they wrote exactly 100 words a day, no more.
I believe it was Neil Gaiman is what I've heard.
No. Older than Gaiman.
Oh.
I think O. Henry or one of those.
Oh,
Yeah. Which I think is probably a little bit too short unless your entire life is dedicated to writing. But think of what is the expected length of whatever project it is you're currently working on? Is it a short story? Is it a novel? And then try and think of okay, how do I break this down into meaningful, manageable bits that I can do on a day? And say, okay, I'm going to do this 1,000 words a day. Don't hit the hard limit of do 1,000 because sometimes, especially if you're already feeling like you are burning yourself out, trying to impose too hard of a deadline can feel like you're punishing yourself. Oh no, I did 1,001 words today. I'm a terrible writer and I should never write again. Right? Don't let your mind do that sort of thing. So just say, try and write maybe about 1,000 words a day, or maybe about 500 words a day.
I would also say one of the last things before we try to get back on track of editing. Instead of limiting yourself to so many words a day, instead of trying to have this goal of so many words because it could still take you 5 hours to get 500 words or 200 words because this damn white page won't stop being white, make time. Just choose, instead of sitting here, I'm going to sit here until I hit so many words or until I get so many pages, I'm going to sit here for an hour, and that's it. And remember, thinking about your story still counts as writing. Thinking about how the characters are going to interact still counts as writing. If you need to get a walking pad and just start walking as you think about your characters and how they're going to interact, congratulations, you just did your writing for an hour. As long as you make notes and don't forget what you came up with and thought and planned out.
Yeah, and your question was a lot more tied towards the writing side of thing, but a similar process even works for editing, and saying, man, you have an entire novel that you're trying to edit right now, and if you just think of trying to edit that entire novel, it's going to feel like an impossible task. So what do? Break it down into pieces and work on those pieces individually. Yeah, definitely when it comes to editing, I would not try and do, I'm going to edit 500 words today, because sometimes you have to edit things and, they, just requires too much time to go through a particular paragraph, and sometimes you just breeze through it like it's nothing. I might say, do a time limit sort of thing, do an hour. And if you're thinking of oh, well, I want to go and do other things, and maybe find a way to kind of play with yourself of going back and forth between, I want to get some editing in, and then I'm going to play a couple rounds of Magic, and then I'll do some editing, and then I'll play a couple rounds of Magic. And, they can be a reward for a good job well done. Thought I just had. It escaped me again. Dang it.
While they're thinking, any other questions? Okay. Double check. Cool. We actually have about 10 more minutes before our soft limit. Okay. Ponder, ponder, ponder. Go ahead.
How do you know, like the prose is fine, but how do you know when a scene is not working? When it's like, it's in the slot, you know what I mean, like in the outline, but something about it, like what do you do when you like, you know something is wrong, but it's like, it's difficult to figure out what it is, you know?
The first thing, there's a few different things you can do. I mean, you can ask yourself why 5 times. Why? I mean, you know it's wrong. Okay, why is it wrong? What? And you have to actually ask yourself. You know it's wrong, but stop and think. What about this scene is rubbing you the wrong way? Is it the way the characters are talking? Is it the way the characters are acting? What about this? You can start high. Like, why do you have an uncomfortable feeling? Because reason X. Okay. Why is reason X a problem? What's wrong with that? Start asking yourself those 5 whys. Could also go back to the idea of, are you doing all 3 things? Are you establishing, advancing the setting, or developing the setting, developing character, or advancing the plot? Are you doing any of those things? Are you doing none of those things? Are you doing just one of those things? Maybe it feels slow for whatever reason because you're only establishing the setting because you're writing it's 1990s and you're Patterson writing The Wheel of Time, and it just doesn't vibe with you anymore. It's because it's not the 90s now.
Also, I would say at some point, learn to trust that inner editor in the same way that you would trust your inner writer. Especially with beginning writers, you often have that problem of just going, man, I don't feel confident enough to put the words on the page. And at some point, you get to that stage of going, no, I can put words on a page. And at some point, you'll have to kind of trust that inner editor in the same way and go, this doesn't feel right. I don't know how to explain that it feels right, but I should trust that inner voice that's telling me something here is not working.
I would also say, worst case, you make a note of, this paragraph didn't work for me. I don't know why, but I'll ask friends later and keep editing.
Yeah. What software do you guys like to use for editing? Do you just do like Google Docs, just like comments on the side, or what's your?
So for myself, I usually use, for me, it's Word is because it's the industry standard, and I understand that means there's a paywall behind it. I apologize. Word is what I currently use. Google Docs is an option. I'm so used to Word at this point that it's what I go to. It's what I would recommend, again, because it's industry standard, unfortunately, which has a lot of problems, yada, yada, yada. I will also say there's a panel right after this called about tech and
writing formats?
Yes, and they'll go over a bunch of different tools you can use, but for me, I just have my whatever. I wrote my story, my novel in Scrivener. I'm pulling it into Word for my editing, and I honestly have Notepad Plus, I believe is what it's called, a version of Notepad that would autosave. This way I can just make notes on there and have something or an actual note. I mean, hell, I have my notes for chapter 1 that I just wrote out when I got the feedback. It's something, that's really what I use myself.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the things that you just use as word processing programs in the first place will also work for whatever self-editing things you're doing. When it comes to adding in comments or that sort of stuff, that's where things can start going a little bit awry, especially if you're working with other people. Let me tell a story of what caused someone to scream very loud and very long. So there's this author in the fandom, maybe some of you have heard of them. Their name is Ruckus. And at one point they had submitted a novel to be published by Fur Planet. I think it was one of their novels that ultimately ended up getting broken into multiple novels because, sorry sweetheart, but 340,000 words is not a single novel. That's multiple. And one of the editors at Fur Planet had done a bunch of edits and sent this over, or they had sent stuff back. I forget which stage this was. But at some point they had used different software. Someone had used Word, someone else had used...
Editor used Word, I believe Ruckus used OpenOffice.
I think it was OpenOffice.
And then Giannis got it back.
Yep, and what had happened is that in between the file format conversions, every single change, every single deletion, every single insertion happened one space to the right.
I thought it was Wingdings.
Nope. No, that was me. But yeah, every single thing happened one step to the right, which meant it all had to be redone. The entire 300,000 word plus novel had to be redone.
Fur Planet turned around and bought Ruckus a copy of Word after that.
Yeah. I have heard these days that it's a lot better, that generally the format conversions between the different softwares is a lot better. But generally when it comes to self-editing and not necessarily getting editing exchange between people, it's whatever works for you. Certain softwares have different techniques that help different things out. Scrivener, I think, has the ability to pull up two things side by side. So if you were talking about the sort of thing of, hey, I want to have a copy of it here and then just revise and rewrite from scratch, it has a thing that will do that. I believe you can do that in several of the other programs, but it might not be as nicely and easily accessible. General rule of thumb is that you can do most anything in Word. You might make your computer screen to do it, but you can probably make it happen. Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for like if you've written multiple books or like a trilogy or a series or something, and then have to go back and edit all of them?
I'm sorry. Personally, if you went out of your way to write a trilogy, I would hope that I'm talking to you now while you have the plans to write a trilogy and say stop after book 1. If you then continued on to book 2 and book 3, I am so sorry for you, honey. It's basically take what we've been explaining on a large level and you just blew that up 3 times. I'm so sorry. It's going to be a pain in the tail.
You're editing that 300,000 word novel that is actually multiple novels.
One of the biggest reasons I would say that this is going to be rough is ignore book 2 and 3 at this point and start editing book 1. Make book 1 shine as much as you can, because if you pitch it to a publisher and they say send us book 1, and then their in-house editor turns around and say, cool, we like this thing here, but I don't like this thing that happened 2/3 of the way in through book 1. Can we make this change? And that changes everything, like half the book of book 2 and all of book 3. Congratulations, we now have to do rewrites on book 2 and 3, which is why I would, at this point in time, just focus on editing book 1. Try to make it as shine as bright as you can before you send it out to your group. I wouldn't even worry about book 2 or 3 until you get book 1, until you actually have a yes on book 1. Unless you're doing gallery sites, and then at that point, it really doesn't matter.
Actually, that kind of brings up a good idea, a good technique for helping yourself get through the editing process, which is that because it can feel so daunting to have, no matter the size of your project, it can be really nice to start on chapter 1, scene 1, whatever it happens to be for you, and spend a long time just getting that to feel absolutely perfect. Because the moment that is feeling right, you can kind of internalize that feeling. What about that is really working for you? And you can carry that forward through the rest of the editing process. If you saw in chapter 1 that's, oh, I wasn't properly marking dialogue tags in all of the dialogue, then wait a minute, you've already logged that into your brain and you're going to apply that throughout the rest of the editing process. If you had to spend some time with a character's internal voice and figuring out how does this character actually sound like, and you worked on it in chapter 1, then you've already done that process and you can just apply that to the rest of the entire story. So that can really, help you move through that process quicker if you spend more time on the first part.
I'm still laughing at myself as I'm finding one character. Okay, who's this talking? Okay, cool, I can smash those 2 words together. Wait, no, this is her talking. I have to drop the G on that. I can't do that. And every time I run past this dialogue, I'm finding something else I can combine or cut. It's like, God damn this editing.
It's a never-ending process if you let it be.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
So I assume that a lot of these methods and mentalities towards editing carries over towards editing of other things too, such as scripts for comics or scripts for videos and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Usually the big difference there is that when you are editing like a short story or a novel, besides the formatting of the page, you basically have complete control over that. You have control over the font, you have control over the paragraphing. Boy, I could just stand up here and talk about nothing but paragraphing for 50 minutes. Be careful if you start me on this. you have control over the specific word choice and where those words will appear. And that is not the same thing you have when you are writing a script. So I've done some stuff with playwriting, although it's been many, many, many years. And there's a completely different thought process of what you're trying to do there, because you're not trying to say, these are the words that will exactly appear to the reader, because you don't have a reader anymore. You have a different type of audience. And so you need to think of, these are the words that I am trying to hand to the actors. These are the words I'm handing to the artists. These are the words I'm handing to the letterer who's going to pen them into all the word bubbles. And so you can not worry about so much of some stuff, like the font doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, typically if you're doing a script, there's a specific font. It's Courier, it's
New.
Courier.
Probably.
Courier New. But beyond that, you don't have to worry about those kinds of details. You have a different set of details that you're worrying about. You know, how do you communicate effectively what you want the artist to accomplish? Or how do I communicate effectively in the word bubbles that are going to appear to the reader? How can I get that across? It's just a different thing that you have to be considering.
I'm gonna let them speak because I was over my head. So I've written one. I BS'd one script. So, but
I believe Kyle Gold has at some point posted a script for one of the comics that he was the writer on. You might want to poke Kyle Gold about that. He might have the script available to share.
Oh, neat. He's in the Artist Alley or the other thing?
He is not here.
that would be on Blue Sky or through his mailing list. You might be able.
Yeah, his mailing list, I think, is where it's on.
He has some sort of contact us that you can reach out to. Look at kylegold.com, and that should have his links. Cool. And we are almost at time. We probably have enough time for one more question if there is one out there. Cool.
I suppose we could kind of, since that kind of inspired me to think about it, this part of the editing process, which is not the words, but is how are you presenting the words on the page, and that kind of self-editing process there. How do you decide where to put a chapter break in? You who are working on editing your novel and sighing dramatically.
My second chapter is only 30,000 words. That's not too bad, right? I don't need any other breaks in there, right? What are you talking about, publisher dog? What are you?
I don't know who that is. Talking about.
Yeah, that's gonna be your problem in another year, right?
So there's a lot of considerations like this, like, you know, where do I put chapters? Where do I put scene breaks? Where do I choose to end this paragraph and start the next paragraph? And oftentimes when you're in the middle of actually writing everything, you aren't necessarily thinking about all of that. You're just trying to say, I want to get to the end of the story. I don't care where the darn scene break happens. But then when you're actually in the editing process, you want to care about that a little bit more. So sometimes it might just be like, you know, again, trusting that inner editor. What's the feeling for things? You know, how do I, you know, if I am, when I'm going through the editing process and rereading everything, am I feeling like things are going on too long? Because if I, who care about this more than anyone else in the world, feel like it's going too long, the reader's definitely going to feel that too. So that's a good moment to say, hey, let's put in a scene break here. Let's put in a chapter break here. Let's allow things to breathe a little bit more. This can also help you as you're going through things to kind of one of your earlier points of just where might scenes not be working, or where do scenes really work, and maybe where do I need something more. Which reminds me of the thing that I forgot 20 minutes ago. So, because it was going back to a point you had raised on talking about editing and deleting things. Now here's the thing, because everyone is different in their editing process. If you go down to the den right now, Tenpei Okun is down there. He has written several novels like the Windfall series and the Sixes Wild series. And he is one of those writers who I don't know how they work, because his final draft is smaller than his first draft. His first draft to final draft is almost always a process of removing words, getting things out. I know other authors who are the absolute reverse, and going from first draft to final draft is a process of adding things.
The infamous 64%.
You know, I'm gonna have nightmares again after that. But yeah, there are some writers who their process of editing is to realize, oh, wait a minute, I didn't actually properly connect this scene to this scene. I need to now include a whole new scene to explain how the characters got from point A to point B. So they are additive when they are going through the process of editing. And don't try and box yourself in as being one or the other, because there's lots of different writers and there's lots of different editing styles. And you might find that after you've done several projects, like, oh, I'm the kind of writer who removes things, or oh, I'm the kind of writer who has to add things, or oh, I'm the writer who just does little tweaks here and there, or I am the writer who is absolutely perfect and none of my words shall ever be questioned ever again. I don't need to edit.
I think I only gave Kyle like 2 comments on their story. I still got changes somehow, but that's.
I have edited a couple of people like Kyle or like Ursula Vernon, and by the time it made it to me, it was absolutely perfect. But I know that Edge has gone through many hands before I ever saw it, and even they are doing a good chunk of editing.
Yep.
Any person who says they don't need editing is because their publisher has lied to them, and they actually have an editor who's working on all of that.
So with that, we are just about at time. We should probably start clearing out for the next group to talk about tech and formatting. Where can people find you online?
Not really much of anywhere. I tend not to have a great online presence.
Fair. I'm TJ Mind. I can be found on Blue Sky and Mastodon, somewhere on TJ Mind at something. I have a number of books downstairs, and yeah, I will see you guys later.
Bye, everyone.